everyone may have perceived Harry to be slightly different. We've got an actor playing it, therefore that's it. So does the human mind want confirmation of its imagination? Does it want to explore the world but kind of be almost handheld as well?
So a classic example where I think that there's a balance between it is James Bond. So the character of James Bond and actually Batman, funnily enough, they're played by multiple actors, but everyone knows who Batman is and everyone knows who James Bond is. As soon as you hear, shaken, not stirred, like, you know that's James Bond, right? And when it's Batman, he's talking like this and is, whatever, like it's the characteristics that define the character. I think in the case of Daniel Radcliffe and Harry Potter, the biggest, I wouldn't say problem, but the biggest reason why we may get stuck with Daniel Radcliffe is because of the timing. Batman movies and James Bond movies, whilst they can skew towards a mid-teen to adult audience, whereas Harry Potter is purely children. You grow up with Harry Potter, and therefore Harry Potter is Daniel Radcliffe. So I think that the timing is really important there.
I think it's also because with Harry Potter there was a start and there was a finish. So it started with Daniel Radcliffe, it ended with Daniel Radcliffe, whereas like Batman, James Bond, even though the current story has finished, the timeline hasn't finished. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The virtual world is failing us.
He's stuck in the void. This is what happens when you spend too much time in reality instead of joining us in the virtual world.
Come out of the void.
Have you tried turning it off and on again? I was actually going to throw it out to the group because I know I just can't think of any right now, but I know that there are situations where originals have been replaced by remakes, and the remake has become the face rather than the original. Anyone can think one off the top of their head? I know it's happened. I just can't think of one.
I guess Spider-Man.
Yeah, the Avengers as well. I was going to say
all of the mans actually. Look at Spider-Man. Look at Batman. Look at He-Man, Superman. All mans.
Well, the reason I brought up Spider-Man was because Spider-Man was replaced in the actor and they started the story over again. So they literally replaced the entire storyline with the new actor rather than actually just carrying on with a new actor like James Bond or Batman.
So, see, what I'm trying to actually highlight here, that it's not that character in the virtual world which is actually the driving force. It is that storyline which has that captivating ability to put the human perception in a story, in a cycle of relating things with something which they actually experience in their real life. So we as a human, because we are experiencing things through our perceptive organs, we want references, and that is how we live our life. We want all the time references. Oh, this is my friend, this is my son, this is my wife, this is my blah, blah, blah. All the times we are actually driven by identifications. So in the virtual realities, which are kind of remake and things, they do it. They always make sure that link is not being broken, so that you can relate to something which was a very rich part of your own experience any point of time from childhood till now. So I think it's not the character, it's that concept which actually makes sense to you.
So just throwing something else on. So Ian, before you were talking about playing soccer. So there are people who play soccer on Xbox, PlayStation, whatever, and then they actually have stadiums dedicated to people playing a game. So you'll have a stadium watching someone play a game of football. So rather than actually watching people play football, they're watching people play as someone playing football.
I'm not an esports follower generally, but I will admit I have watched one match of esports and gotten involved somehow. I don't know why I got so emotionally invested in the game. Yeah, like I said, it's not reality. I think people just like to pick sides, to be honest, and I think that's true in everything, whether it's sports, whether it's in movies. In movies, they kind of engineer who you're going to pick and which side you're going to take, but you always want someone to root for and associate with. And in the case of esports, you'll find something to anchor, right? Maybe you're watching the first 5 minutes and then the one of the players scores first, and then you immediately hate that player because you're like, I want the underdog to win, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. But in this virtual world that you've created, there's actually opposition. Look at sport in general. None of that matters. Who cares if the Patriots win the Super Bowl? It's just. Oh, sorry. Apparently, Brad's a big Patriots fan. But who actually cares? This is faux stakes, and that's video games in a nutshell. It's faux stakes that we've somehow become emotionally invested in.
This sounds like the opinion of someone who had to, I guess, get used to this because of the Parramatta Eels.
Look, you see, if you can accept that you will never win, your life will be much better. You're never disappointed.
Okay, so are we now basically spinning it around to identity? If you can identify yourself in a scenario, in a scene, in an experience, whether it's real or virtual, in any way, if you can identify, like you associate yourself with a team, with a player, with a part of the storyline, with the protagonist of a story, then it draws you in. It basically locks you into the narrative. So whether it's a game and then there's competition, or whether it's basically an adventure, your identity being connected carries our mind and our imagination with it, and we experience life in that way.
Yeah, so this goes back to the whole looking from inside out to outside in, right? See, the whole concept of movies and having the viewer watching the movie, perceiving that character as themselves. I think whenever you are wanting to create a movie or create a game, there must always be the hero and the villain in play. And which side, and sometimes you find if you ask a lot of people, depending on the movie as well, sometimes they usually identify themselves with the villain in that scenario because they see themselves in the shoes of the villain, because the whole concept of being defined with the good side is purely, I think, is something we must need to consider. When you take example, when Will Smith did the Suicide Squad, right? He really tried to embrace this dark side because he's saying, this is the whole thing where you want to make sure you're not just saying, I am this person. He saying, oh, I'm a good person. I'm only positive attitude. That is something you need to, whenever you're watching a movie, you need to see it from both perspectives, right? You're not identifying yourself in just the hero, but you need to see it from the villain side as well. If it's to be a good movie or a good game, there's this concept, I don't know if you guys heard, first of all, like 4 stages, right, in the movie. So you can have, in the beginning, everything is beautiful, and then slowly the whole little bit of rascality comes into the play, right? Then the drama builds up. But at the same time, as soon as that starts building up, you sort of identifying yourself with the good person of the story. But the whole concept of the drama is that if you don't identify yourself with the dark side, you're only seeing one perspective. And this is the whole identity where we build up, is more saying, we're only this person, but we're not that person. But if you wanted to see the whole bigger picture, you need to embrace both sides of the story, right?
Yeah, while we're on the concept of heroes and villains, I believe that in a lot of movies and games, some people would identify with the villain because if you get the backstory, you might find that, the reason that he's a villain is he or she didn't necessarily want to be, but because of maybe the circumstances they grow up in. For instance, I've read a bit about relaunched She-Ra, who was He-Man's sister, and her protagonist in that series is like a panther girl, and She-Ra and her used to be we're both orphans wandering the streets, got taken in by this evil organization. She-Ra becomes the voice of the goddess, pretty much leaves the evil organization, and is then fighting against her friend. I can't remember who it is, but it was because they initially got brought up in that situation where they were pretty much fighting for survival. That's probably why a lot of people would go down the villain path, because a lot of the villains didn't exactly choose to be that because of the situation, and that's where some people actually that might come from similar situations, that's why they probably would identify with the villain as well.
All right. Some people identify with the villain, Some people identify with the hero. And if we are immersed in these virtual environments, are they real? Is it real life? Does it have to be in the physical world for it to be actually real? Because you can draw yourself into that world, experience your actual heart rate increasing, you can perspire, you can stress, you can worry. The movie ends, you're still thinking about it, you can't sleep all night because you're still wondering about it, or you play too many games and you're dreaming of Zerg rushes or tiles of Tetris blocks falling from heaven trying to crush you. So is the virtual world just as real? It just happens to be non-physical.
I'd say it's a drug, if anything, because it isn't real and you can get addicted to the feeling that you get from it, but it's not reality, if that makes sense. I see that you're looking at me with disbelieving eyes.
Elaborate, Ian. Please expand on that.
Well, again, you can base a virtual world on reality. I wish Atish was still here because you could argue that the Matrix was that exact concept. Now, to everyone inside the Matrix, it was real, but in reality, it was a desolate world where they were being used as batteries by robots. And I get where you're coming from. You're probably making the argument that whatever you're aware of as real is real to you. But I think in the situation of games and movies and virtual worlds where you insert yourself in, generally speaking, you will know that it's not real. But having said that, the mind has this amazing ability to fool itself. And at some point, if you play it enough, it does, in your head at least, become reality. But it's still not reality. That's the way I view it.
I think it's dangerous when you can't differentiate. I mean, there's many examples in the past of people playing a violent game and then going out in the streets and causing violence. You hear, the US shootings, and it turns out the person played Modern Warfare a lot, and started to believe it was fine to run around with a gun.
See, I think that's correlation and causation. Like, just because we've probably all played violent video games at some point, but that doesn't mean we're about to commit some violence. But I'm just calling that out because it's just too common a narrative in the media that, he's got Modern Warfare. That must be the reason that he's a violent person. So.
Yeah, that was sort of my point. Like, it's dangerous when you can't differentiate. It doesn't mean that it's actually a valid reason. Like, when I play video games, generally I play as the villain. Why? Because it's more fun, because it's different to reality. It doesn't mean I'm going to go out, lassoing people and shooting them or, anything like that. It's just different to real life, and that's why you do it.
Well, on the point of people playing violent video games and not disassociating with reality, there was a case in the US about 2 months ago where it was a esports Tony Madden game, which is probably the least violent game you could think of, which is a football game. And one of the participants thought the other guy was cheating, and got a gun and shot 2 or 3 of the people there at the actual event. No one died, but it wasn't a violent game at all. And the guy just snapped and just started shooting at people randomly at a esports game for a sports game.
I think the dangerous miscorrelation here is the fact that it's not violent games that make violent people. It's the fact that violent people have a tendency of being introverts, and they find salvation in video games. So the correlation between the two are probably unrelated altogether. It's just that some people who are likely to shoot people to start with start playing video games rather than the other way around. I never hear of people who, start playing a video game obsessed with puppies and bunnies and all the rest and come out as a serial killer. I imagine it would normally be the other way around. They go in there being a serial killer, finding methods in the games, being motivated to apply it to reality.
Okay, well, I think that's actually a really valid point. It's not the game, it's the person. Wow, what a concept. Imagine that.
Something that the Americans probably could have learned from us all.
But then,
or the politicians,
back to your original points, bro. Are they real people or are they virtual people?
Well, exactly. If you kill a player in the game who is technically another human being on the other side of the planet who's really engrossed and really, really experiencing the game, and you terminate their virtual experience, you are effectively cutting off a part of their life. It's a virtual life, but you have just ended it. Now, we say it's not real anyway, it's virtual, it doesn't mean anything. But to the individual, it could be their life. They could live online. It could be their passion. It could be something that they identify with. And if we terminate their identity, what happens next?
So I don't know if you guys have seen that video